Kylian Mbappé became a World Cup champion at 19, shattered PSG's all-time scoring record, and earned more individual honors than most players see in a lifetime. Yet the Champions League, the one trophy that defines club football immortality, keeps escaping him. And here's the detail that turns frustration into genuine mystery. Paris Saint-Germain won it the first full season after he left, then defended it. So is this about timing, about tactics, about the teams built around him, or about Mbappé himself? Kylian Mbappe's career stands on a razor's edge between greatness and an unyielding question. He conquered the world with France before he could legally buy a drink, swept through Ligue 1 with a scoring record that left legends behind, and stacked his shelves with golden boots, Player of the Year trophies, and Ballon d'Or nominations. Yet the Champions League, club football's ultimate prize, remains the one gap in his collection. For years, he was the centerpiece of Paris Saint-Germain, the player everything revolved around, the hope of a nation, and the face of a billion-euro project. But as the seasons passed, each knockout round exit deepened the shadow of that missing trophy. Then, in a twist that stings more than any defeat, PSG finally lifted the Champions League only after Mbappe's departure, and then did it again. The absence of this one title haunts the narrative, raising the possibility that his legacy will be measured not just by what he achieved, but by the one thing he never held. Kylian Mbappé entered the world in December 1998, just as France celebrated its first World Cup. Even as a child in Bondy, the expectations felt larger than the city itself. His father, Wilfred, coached at AS Bondy and shaped the first steps of his football education, while his mother, Faiza, a former handball player, set the standard for discipline and ambition. The local pitches became his proving ground, but it was Clairefontaine, France's elite academy, that transformed early promise into a national obsession. Coaches and journalists alike saw a boy born in the year of triumph, destined to inherit the weight of a footballing nation. From his bedroom walls, Cristiano Ronaldo stared back at him. Real Madrid, the club of his dreams, felt like both a destination and a challenge. But the first leap came with Monaco. At just 16, Mbappé debuted for the Principality Club, and within a year, he was rewriting records. Youngest scorer, youngest starter, and soon, the youngest Frenchman to light up the Champions League knockout rounds. The 2016 to 2017 season with Monaco became a whirlwind. Alongside Radamel Falcao, Mbappé helped dethrone PSG in Ligue 1 and led a fearless run in Europe. Manchester City fell, then Borussia Dortmund. The semifinals brought Juventus, and finally, defeat. In the aftermath, Mbappé made a vow, one that would echo through every chapter of his career. He would win the Champions League one day. The promise, spoken with the certainty of youth, became a shadow that never left him, even as the spotlight grew brighter. The summer of 2017 brought a decision that would define the next era of European football. Kylian Mbappé, already the most coveted teenager in the world, stood at a crossroads. Real Madrid had courted him for years, offering the promise of following in the footsteps of his idol, Cristiano Ronaldo, and the chance to join a club where Champions League triumphs were expected, not dreamed. Yet Mbappé chose Paris Saint-Germain, a move shaped by family counsel and the pull of becoming France's own superstar. The deal, alone with a €180 million obligation to buy, shattered records and made him the most expensive teenager in history. This was more than a transfer. PSG's entire project, bankrolled by Qatari ambition, shifted to orbit around him. The club, desperate for European validation, handed him the keys. With that came a new weight. Every goal, every missed chance, every Champions League campaign became a referendum on his choice and his ability to deliver what no Frenchman had done since Zidane, carry a French club to the summit of Europe. The expectation was total, and the obligation inescapable. The first PSG era unfolded like a grand experiment in modern football stardom, a team stacked with attacking firepower, engineered for dominance in France, yet always chasing validation from across the continent. Mbappé, still in his teens, joined forces with Neymar and Edinson Cavani to form a front line that overwhelmed Ligue 1. The numbers piled up: 6 top-scorer titles, 5 Player of the Year awards, and a shelf crowded with domestic trophies. PSG swept aside rivals at home, collecting league and cup doubles with a sense of routine. Each year, the spotlight on Mbappé grew brighter. He won the Golden Boy Award in 2017, then became the youngest player to reach 100 League One goals. The club's Qatari owners poured resources into building a super team around him, hoping to finally conquer Europe. But the Champions League proved immune to their formula. Each spring brought a fresh heartbreak, late collapses, missed chances, and exits against the continent's elite. The partnership with Neymar dazzled in flashes. Cavani's goals delivered reliability, but the chemistry never quite settled on the biggest nights. Critics pointed to tactical imbalances, a midfield stretched thin, a front three that pressed only in moments, and a reliance on moments of individual magic to break open tight games. Supporters countered that no other French club had ever carried such weight, and that Mbappe's brilliance kept hope alive even as the collective faltered. Meanwhile, the contrast with his international exploits only sharpened. In the summer of 2018, Mbappé exploded onto the global stage, scoring 4 goals at the World Cup, including a stunning solo run against Argentina and lifting the trophy at 19. The world saw a player destined for greatness, a teenager who thrived under the heaviest pressure. The expectation followed him back to Paris. If he could dominate the world with France, why not Europe with PSG? Each Champions League exit deepened the frustration, turning domestic victories into reminders of what was missing. The paradox grew sharper with every season. Mbappé, the global icon, still waiting for the one prize that would complete his story. August 2020, Lisbon. The Champions League final unfolded under the strange hush of a pandemic, the stands empty, the world watching from behind closed doors. For Paris Saint-Germain, it was the moment years of ambition had pointed toward: their first appearance on club football's most sacred stage. Every decision, every record transfer, every heartbreak in the knockout rounds seemed to converge on this night. At the center stood Kylian Mbappé, the face of the project, carrying the hopes of a city and the weight of a promise he had made as a teenager. The match against Bayern Munich was tense, tactical, and suffocating. PSG's attacks flared in bursts, but Bayern's discipline held. Just before halftime, Mbappé found himself with the ball at his feet, inside the box, the kind of chance that had become his trademark. The shot was quick, low, and straight at Manuel Neuer. The moment slipped away. Later, another opportunity. He struck, and the ball glanced off the outside of the post. In a final decided by the thinnest of margins, these were the moments that lingered. Kingsley Coman's header broke the deadlock. PSG, after years of being defined by what they might become, were now defined by what they had lost. The final whistle left Mbappe staring into space, the dream just out of reach. In that silence, the absence of the trophy became personal, not just for the club, but for the player who had come to symbolize its quest. The defeat in Lisbon was not just another loss. It was a scar, a night that turned hope into a haunting and left the Champions League as the one prize that still refused to be claimed. After the heartbreak in Lisbon, Paris Saint-Germain's grand experiment with superstar power only grew more complex. The club cycled through managers, Pochettino, Galtier, then Luis Enrique, each bringing a new vision, but never enough time to let their ideas take root. Every change in the dugout meant new tactics, new promises, and new confusion. At the center of it all, the pressure from Qatar's ownership intensified. Each Champions League campaign became a referendum on the entire project, every elimination a public trial of ambition and identity. Lionel Messi's arrival in the summer of 2021 was supposed to be the final piece. On paper, a front line of Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe was unrivaled. The world watched, expecting fireworks and silverware. Instead, the trio became a puzzle the team never solved. In some matches, their combined talent overwhelmed opponents, but the chemistry flickered and faded. Locker room whispers grew louder, questions about leadership, about who would take penalties, about who truly ran the show. Some teammates felt sidelined, others struggled to find their roles. The hierarchy, once clear, now felt fragile. Tactically, the team often looked stretched. Managers tried to balance attacking brilliance with defensive stability, but the midfield was left exposed and the press became inconsistent. Opponents learned to exploit the spaces left behind. When Real Madrid knocked PSG out in the 2022 quarterfinals, the defeat laid bare the limits of assembling stars without forging a true collective. For all the headlines and highlights, the project could not deliver the one prize it was built to claim. The more PSG leaned into individual greatness, the harder it became to build the unity needed to conquer Europe. The summer of 2022 changed the terms of power in Paris. Kylian Mbappe's contract renewal did more than keep him at PSG. It placed him at the center of every ambition, every debate, every disappointment. The club's hierarchy made him the highest-paid player in French football and gave him a voice in sporting decisions, a status rarely seen for someone his age. With that came a different kind of spotlight. Former players and pundits began to question whether the project had become too focused on one man. Some argued that his influence over tactics and transfers blurred the line between leadership and control, while others saw only a young player shouldering a city's impossible expectations. The penalty controversy in 2022, when Mbappe missed in a tense clash with Marseille, became a flashpoint. Critics seized on the moment, pointing to a pattern. When the stakes rose, so did questions about his authority and the team's unity. The media dissected every gesture, every interview, every sign of frustration. Accusations of ego and demands for greater sacrifice clashed with reminders of his willingness to take responsibility in the most pressurized moments. The debate spilled beyond the pitch. Was PSG's project undermined by its reliance on an individual, or was it simply asking too much of a single generational talent? The scrutiny became relentless, each result a referendum not just on Mbappe's talent, but on the very idea of building a team around one star. Qatar, December 2022. On the grandest stage, Kylian Mbappé delivered the kind of World Cup performance that erases all doubt about individual greatness. He led France through the tournament with a new sense of authority, no longer just the prodigy, but a player whose decisions and demeanor shaped the team's path. In the final against Argentina, with the world watching, Mbappé scored a hat-trick, 3 goals that pulled France back from the brink, matching a feat last seen from Pelé in 1958. His third, a penalty under the crushing weight of the moment, sent the match to penalties. The Golden Boot was his, 8 goals in 7 games, a record for a player in his prime. Yet the ultimate prize slipped away in the shootout. What lingered was not failure, but the clarity of his impact. In a disciplined, balanced French side under Didier Deschamps, Mbappé's brilliance was amplified, not isolated. The outcome was decided by inches, not by any lack in his leadership or talent. Here, the evidence was undeniable. The problem was never simply the man at the center. Luis Enrique arrived in Paris with a message that echoed through every corridor at PSG. Individual brilliance was no longer enough. The new coach demanded more from every player, but his challenge to Kylian Mbappé was especially pointed. Training sessions grew intense, with Enrique pushing for relentless pressing and defensive commitment. The viral moment came during a private conversation, captured by cameras and shared across the football world. Enrique referenced Michael Jordan, telling Mbappé that true greatness meant leading on both sides of the ball. The comparison was not just flattery, it was a public call for transformation, a demand that Mbappé become the engine of the press as well as the spearhead of the attack. On the pitch, the shift was unmistakable. PSG's pressing numbers soared, with the team averaging 22 pressures per 90 minutes, up from 15 2 years before. Mbappé found himself tasked with tracking back, covering space, and setting the tone for a squad that could no longer rely on moments of individual magic alone. The Champions League campaign brought a sense of urgency. Against Barcelona in the quarter-finals, Mbappé delivered a decisive performance, helping PSG overturn a deficit and advance. Yet the semi-final against Borussia Dortmund exposed the limits of the experiment. PSG's attack stalled, and the German side advanced with a 2-0 aggregate win. The season ended not with a trophy, but with a farewell. Mbappé's time in Paris closed with the Champions League still out of reach, the promise unfulfilled. The final chapter with PSG became a study in tactical evolution and psychological strain, one last attempt to reconcile the demands of collective sacrifice with the burden of being the star everyone expected to deliver salvation. The announcement arrived with the force of a long-delayed prophecy. Kylian Mbappé, at last, was a Real Madrid player. Years of speculation, failed negotiations, and near misses faded into the background as he signed a 5-year contract, complete with a record-breaking €150 million signing bonus. But this was no ordinary arrival. Madrid did not simply add a star. They unveiled their newest Galactico, the one meant to restore their European supremacy. The weight of the white shirt carried its own history. For generations, legends have come to Madrid not just to win, but to define eras. The Bernabeu demanded more than brilliance. It demanded the Champions League. From the first moment, the expectations were unspoken but absolute. Mbappe was here to finish the story that had haunted him since Monaco. At Real Madrid, there would be no grace period, no time to settle. The pressure to deliver the one trophy that had eluded him, and to do it quickly, was immediate and unrelenting. The move to Madrid demanded more than a change of scenery. It forced a transformation. Gone was the comfort of the left wing, where space and rhythm had become second nature. Under Carlo Ancelotti and then Xabi Alonso, Mbappe found himself at the heart of the attack, flanked by Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo. The new system required him to play with his back to goal, to link passes, to time runs through the middle rather than drifting wide. Every movement was scrutinized, every touch judged against the ghosts of Bernabeu legends. The challenge was as much technical as psychological. The Spanish league offered little margin for error, and in Europe, the demands only intensified. Still, Mbappe's scoring touch never deserted him. By the spring of 2026, he led the Champions League in goals, including a hat-trick in a knockout round that saw Real Madrid overpower Manchester City. Yet even these heroics could not mask the team's uneven form. A quarterfinal clash with Bayern Munich exposed the cracks, defensive lapses, missed chances, and the weight of expectation pressing down on every minute. Injury struck at the worst time, a left knee sprain that forced him to the sidelines during crucial matches. Madrid's campaign ended in frustration, the European dream slipping away once more. For all his individual brilliance, the question remained, could even the brightest star bend the shape of a team? Or would the system always demand more than one man could give? The debate over Kylian Mbappe's legacy has become a contest of explanations, each one staking a claim on football's most elusive question. Some point to the way teams have shaped themselves around him, arguing that the gravitational pull of a superstar bends tactics until the collective starts to fray. Former players and analysts dissect his role, questioning whether his preference for isolation on the wing or his bursts of individual brilliance force managers to compromise defensive solidity. The modern game, they say, demands more than goals. It demands pressing, sacrifice, and a willingness to run for others when the ball is lost. Yet the counter-argument is hard to ignore. Mbappe's consistency in Ligue 1, his record-breaking scoring, and his performances for France inside a balanced national team setup all suggest that, given structure, his brilliance can amplify rather than diminish a collective. In Deschamps' disciplined system, he thrived, his work rate and focus blending seamlessly with the team's needs, his leadership unquestioned in the moments that mattered most. Others looked to timing and context, PSG's revolving door of coaches, the lack of a stable midfield, and the relentless pressure from ownership all conspired to create an environment where no single player could deliver alone. At Real Madrid, the story is still being written. Was it simply a matter of the right system, the right teammates, or the right moment? The Champions League remains the final measure, and with it, the question of whether greatness can ever be separated from the team that surrounds it. Today, the world still waits to see if brilliance alone can overcome the machinery of elite club football. Mbappe stands at the crossroads of individual greatness and collective history, his every touch magnified by the shadow of what's missing. As the Champions League remains just out of reach, his pursuit becomes a mirror, not only for ambition, but for the fragile balance between genius and legacy. What's your verdict?